In 1950, one Arkansas county had over 82,000 people. Today, barely 40,000, half a county just gone. But here's what should really stop you cold. Right now in 10 Arkansas towns, you can buy an entire house for less than the price of a used truck, 3 bedrooms, big yard, quiet street, rock bottom price, and nobody's buying. Not investors, not families, not even the bargain hunters who live for deals like this. These homes just sit there, empty, year after year after year. So what does a house have to do to scare everyone away in 2026? Because it's not the crime, it's not the weather. The real reason is quieter than that. And honestly, a whole lot more permanent. Stick with me to the end, because the last town on this list isn't just losing buyers, it's vanishing off the map entirely. Number 1, Pine Bluff. Let's start with the town that made national headlines for all the wrong reasons. Pine Bluff didn't just shrink. For a while, it wore the crown as the fastest shrinking city in all of America. Let that sink in. Out of thousands of cities in this country, this was number 1 on the way down. Look at the trajectory, and it's genuinely staggering. The population dropped to around 38,000 by 2024, a 6% fall in just 4 years. And it hasn't stopped. It's still sliding at roughly 1.5% every single year. That's not a dip, that's a slow-motion exodus. Now here's the part that surprises almost everyone. You'd assume the problem is that homes are just too cheap, right? Wrong. The real crisis in Pine Bluff isn't price, it's abandonment. Drive down certain streets and you'll see block after block of vacant, crumbling houses. And here's the brutal domino effect. One empty house drags down the value of every occupied home around it. Think about it from a buyer's point of view. Would you sink your savings into a house when the home next door has sat empty and rotting for 10 years? Of course not. That vacant house becomes a warning sign flashing, "Stay away." Locals themselves have openly called this a major housing crisis. So the real reason nobody's buying in Pine Bluff isn't the cost. It's the contagion of empty homes. Every abandoned property makes the next one harder to sell, which creates more abandoned properties. It feeds on itself. And here's the practical takeaway if you're ever house hunting anywhere. Always count the empty homes on the street before you count the price tag. A cheap house surrounded by vacant ones isn't a bargain. It's a trap. Pine Bluff learned that lesson the hard way, and it's still paying for it today. This is only town number 1, and already the pattern is forming. Number 2, Helena West, Helena. Now travel east, all the way to the banks of the Mississippi River, and you'll find Helena West, Helena. A town that basically tells the story of the entire Arkansas Delta in one heartbreaking place. The numbers here are flat out brutal. Back in 2000, the combined population sat around 15,000. By 2010, it had dropped to roughly 12,000. And it has kept bleeding people every year since. But the figure that really stops you cold is this one. Today, roughly 30% of residents live below the poverty line. Nearly 1 in 3. That's not a struggling town. That's a town in survival mode. So what's the real reason buyers won't touch it? To understand that, you have to understand what this town was. Helena West. Helena was once a thriving river commerce and agricultural hub. Cotton money flowed through here. The river brought trade, jobs, and life. This was a place people moved toward. Then the agricultural economy collapsed. Cotton faded. River commerce dried up as railroads and highways took over. And here's the cruel part. There was no second act. No new industry rolled in to replace the old one. The engine just died, and nothing restarted it. Here's the principle underneath all of this, and it's one every buyer should burn into their memory. A home is only worth what someone can earn nearby to pay for it. When the paychecks vanish, the housing market vanishes right behind them. It doesn't matter how charming the house is, how big the lot is, or how low the price drops. If there's no way to earn a living nearby, there's no way to sell the house. You simply cannot build a mortgage on nostalgia. Buyers know this instinctively. They look at Helena West Helena, they see the poverty rate, they see the missing jobs, and they quietly move on. And so the decline deepens, house by empty house. Number 3, Blytheville. This next one genuinely stings because Blytheville wasn't always a cautionary tale. Once upon a time, this town boomed. Rewind to the 1970 census. Blytheville was home to nearly 25,000 people. It was busy, it was growing, it had momentum. Families put down roots here, believing the good times would last forever. Then fast forward to 2020, and that number had collapsed to around 13,000. Nearly half the town, gone. And even now it's still falling at close to 2% a year. So what happened? What was the gut punch moment that flipped a booming town into a shrinking one? The Air Force Base closed. And here's why that mattered so much. Blytheville hadn't just hosted a base, it had built its entire economy around it. The jobs, the businesses, the restaurants, the housing demand, all of it orbited that one military installation. So when the base shut down, the town didn't lose a piece of its economy. It lost the sun that everything else revolved around. Overnight. This is what economists call a single point of failure economy, when one employer basically is the town. And the real reason homes don't sell in Blytheville comes down to simple, cold math that buyers do in about 3 seconds. No base, no jobs, no reason to stay, no offer on the house. Here's your practical lesson, and it applies to any town you might consider. Ask what would happen if the biggest employer disappeared tomorrow. If the answer is the whole town collapses, that's not a stable place to buy a home. That's a bet with terrible odds. But, and I promised you this earlier, Blytheville has a flicker of hope. The town's steel industry has been fighting hard to write a comeback story, drawing in new investment and new jobs. Whether it's enough to reverse decades of decline, that's the billion-dollar question. We'll come back to that at the very end. Number 4, Forrest City. Forrest City, tucked into eastern Arkansas, is one of the most fascinating, and honestly, one of the most unsettling cases on this entire list. Because on paper, it looks like it should be fine. Here's why. Forrest City has something most of these towns would kill for: a large, stable employer that isn't going anywhere. It's home to a big federal prison, housing around 1,800 people. In a region where factories keep closing, a permanent federal facility sounds like a lifeline, right? Except here's the uncomfortable truth that researchers have pointed out, and it flips the whole thing on its head. A prison doesn't build a town. Think about it. Those 1,800 inmates get counted in the population statistics. On paper, they make Forrest City look bigger and healthier than it actually is. But those people don't buy homes. They don't shop on Main Street. They don't send kids to the local schools. They don't fill the pews on Sunday or spend money at the diner. They exist inside the population number, but not inside the real economy. So the real reason buyers stay away is what I'd call a statistical mirage. The population figure looks propped up and stable, but the actual economy, the manufacturing jobs that once employed thousands of regular working families, has shrunk dramatically. And buyers can feel when a town's numbers don't match its streets. They drive through, they see the closed factories, they see the struggling businesses, and something just feels off. Because the census number is telling a story, the sidewalks don't back up. Here's the takeaway. Not all population is the same population. A town of 12,000 free, working, home-buying residents is a completely different market than a town where a huge chunk of that number is behind walls. Always ask who is actually in the market to buy. In Forrest City, the honest answer is far fewer people than the number suggests. Number 5, Crossett. If you want the single clearest, cleanest example of exactly why a town loses its buyers, the whole cause and effect in one place, look no further than Crossett. This one isn't subtle. It's almost like a science experiment. Here's what happened. In 2019, Georgia Pacific announced it was shutting down a major part of its mill right here in Crossett. And this wasn't a small trim. This wiped out over 500 jobs in a single announcement. Now, in a big city, 500 jobs lost is painful but survivable. In a small town, 500 jobs isn't a layoff. It's an extinction-level event. That mill wasn't just an employer, it was the employer. It was the reason the town existed. Let me walk you through the chain reaction, because this is the real reason in its purest, most visible form. The mill worker loses his job, so he puts his house up for sale and starts looking to move where the work is. Totally rational. But here's the catch. So do the other 500 workers. All at once, all in the same tiny town, all at the exact same moment. Suddenly, Crossett has way more homes for sale than it has people who can afford to buy them. Supply explodes, demand collapses, and prices don't just dip, they fall straight through the floor. And here's the truly cruel irony, the part that captures this entire video. Even at those rock-bottom giveaway prices, there's still no buyer. Why? Because the very reason to move to Crossett just got shut down along with the mill. Cheap houses mean nothing if there's no job waiting for you. The practical lesson here is razor sharp. When one company owns a town's fate, that town's housing market is only ever one press release away from collapse. Crossett got that press release in 2019, and it's still living with the aftershocks today. Number 6, Camden. Camden is a town that breaks your heart a little because it has something a lot of these places don't. Genuine old-fashioned charm. Historic buildings. Beautiful old homes with real character. The kind of architecture you simply can't build anymore. Drive through the right neighborhood and you'll think, wow, why would anyone leave here? And then you look at the economy and you understand exactly why. Camden is a classic story of industrial decline. The factories and industrial employers that once gave this town its backbone slowly shut down or moved away, taking waves of jobs with them. And when the jobs left, the people followed, because they had no other choice. Now here's the insight I really want you to sit with, because it's one of the most important lessons in this whole video. Charm does not sell a house. Opportunity sells a house. We have this romantic idea that a beautiful old home in a pretty historic town should be an easy sell. But that's not how buyers actually think in 2026, especially younger buyers. They're not standing in the front yard asking, "Is this house pretty?" They're asking a much harder, much more practical question. Can I build a life here? Can I find a job? Can my spouse find a job? Will there be work here in 10 years when I'm still paying off this mortgage? And in Camden, for far too many buyers, the honest answer to all of those questions is no. That's the tragedy of it. When the answer is no, all that beautiful architecture, all that history and character becomes what real estate professionals quietly call unsellable at any price. The house could be a genuine work of art, and it still won't move. So remember this the next time a stunning, cheap home catches your eye online. Ask about the jobs before you fall in love with the porch. Beauty is not the same thing as value. Number 7, Dumas. Here's a warning sign that almost nobody thinks to check when they're buying a home. And it might be the most powerful early indicator of all. Forget the price. Forget the crime map. Look at the school. Welcome to Dumas in southeast Arkansas. And in Dumas, something alarming is happening inside the school district. Enrollment has been dropping so fast, so steeply, that it's actually outpacing the town's overall population decline. Read that again, because it's the key. The schools are emptying out faster than the town itself. That gap has sparked very real fears that the district could eventually be forced to close. Now, why does this matter so much for the housing market? Why am I telling you to watch classrooms instead of listings? Because school enrollment is a leading indicator. It tells you what's coming before it shows up anywhere else. Here's the logic. A shrinking school means one specific, devastating thing. Young families are leaving and no new young families are moving in to replace them. And young families are the lifeblood of any housing market. They're the buyers. They're the ones who need 3 bedrooms and a yard. They're the future demand for every home in town. So when the school empties out, it's like watching the next decade's buyers walk out the door in real time. No families today means no buyers tomorrow. This is genuinely one of the most actionable tips in this entire video. So let me make it crystal clear. Before you buy a home anywhere, look up whether the local school enrollment is rising or falling. A shrinking school is a shrinking housing market with a 5-year head start. By the time the for sale signs pile up, the schools already knew. They always know first. In Dumas, the classrooms have been sounding the alarm for years. The housing market is simply catching up to what the empty desks already predicted. Number 8, West Memphis. You'd think West Memphis would be the one town on this list that beats the odds. After all, it has the one thing everyone in real estate obsesses over: location, location, location. It sits right across the Mississippi River from Memphis, Tennessee, a major city with jobs, culture, and opportunity just minutes away. That should be a golden ticket, right? It hasn't been, not even close. Look at the numbers. The population slipped from around 24,500 in 2020 down to roughly 23,100 by 2026. A steady decline of just under 1% every year. Slow, quiet, relentless. Not a dramatic crash like Crossett, but a persistent leak that never seems to stop. So here's the real reason, and it's genuinely counterintuitive. It might even flip the way you think about location entirely. Being right next to a bigger city doesn't always help a town. Sometimes it actively hurts it. Think it through from a buyer's perspective. If you can live in Memphis, with more jobs, more restaurants, more amenities, more everything, and it's just a short drive away, why would you buy in West Memphis instead? For a lot of people, the answer is simply, you wouldn't. The bigger city acts like a magnet, pulling in the residents, the businesses, and the investment that West Memphis desperately needs to keep. In other words, proximity to Memphis becomes a drain, not a magnet. The big neighbor doesn't lift West Memphis up. It quietly siphons its lifeblood away, one family and one business at a time. And here's the practical wisdom hidden in this. Being near a great city isn't automatically good for a town. It depends on which direction the people are flowing. Are they spilling out into the smaller town because the big one is overflowing? Or are they getting pulled in, leaving the smaller town hollow? In West Memphis, for years now, the flow has been going the wrong way, and the housing market shows it. Number 9, Osceola. Osceola, sitting up in Mississippi County, is the town that reveals just how deep and how long the Delta's decline really runs. Because most of the stories we've talked about span a few decades, Osceola's story spans an entire lifetime, and the scale of it is almost hard to believe. Consider this one staggering figure. Mississippi County, the county Osceola calls home, had a population of over 82,000 people back in 1950. By 2020, it had fallen to around 40,000. That's half the county, gone, vanished within a single human lifetime. A person born there in 1950 could have watched, in their own years on Earth, literally half their neighbors disappear. So what's the real reason buyers hesitate in a place like Osceola? It's not one single factory closing or one flood. It's something deeper and, frankly, more discouraging. I call it generational momentum. Here's what I mean. When a town has one bad year, buyers see a dip, a temporary setback they might gamble on. But when a place has been shrinking for 70 straight years, buyers don't see a dip anymore. They see a direction, a destiny, a trend so long and so consistent that betting against it feels foolish. And nobody wants to sink their life savings into a 70-year downhill slide, no matter how low the price drops. The cheapness stops being tempting and starts being a red flag. Buyers instinctively ask, if it's this cheap and it's been declining this long, what do these people know that I don't? That's the trap of generational momentum. The longer a town declines, the harder it becomes to ever reverse that decline, because the decline itself scares away the very buyers who could turn it around. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy written across 7 decades. Here's the lesson. Don't just look at a town's price, look at its direction. A cheap home in a place that's been falling for generations isn't a bargain. It's a warning. Number 10, Corona. And now, the town I promised you at the very beginning. The one that isn't just losing buyers, it's disappearing off the face of the map entirely. This is the one that'll stay with you. Meet Corona, a tiny river community whose story sounds almost too extreme to be real. In 1950, its census district had a population of 281 people. Modest but alive. A real community with families and homes and history. Now fast forward to 2022, and that number had collapsed to 15. 15 people. That's not a town anymore. That's the last flicker of one. So here's the real reason, and it's the most permanent, most terrifying reason on this entire list. It's not a closed factory. It's not a lost military base. It's water, and not the lack of it, the threat of it. Corona sits dangerously exposed to the Mississippi River, and repeated, devastating flooding has slowly made life there nearly impossible. One longtime resident told reporters that a flood knocked out her home's running water, and it never came back. She now physically cannot spend the night in the house she raised her children in. And here's the killer detail. She cannot obtain flood insurance at all. Around 43% of homes in that zip code face a moderate risk of flooding over the next 30 years. Now think like a buyer for 1 second. You cannot sell a house that can't be insured, can't get clean drinking water, and might be underwater by spring. It's not a low-value home. It's a zero-value home. Uninsurable, uninhabitable, unsellable. So what's actually happening to Corona today is haunting. The homes aren't being bought by families anymore. They're being quietly snapped up by hunting clubs. For duck season, a whole way of life, a whole community with generations of history is fading silently into the riverbank, one flood at a time. So step back now. Look at all 10 of these towns together. Pine Bluff, Helena, Blytheville, Forrest City, Crossett, Camden, Dumas, West Memphis, Osceola, and little vanishing Corona. And the real reason finally snaps into focus. Here's the truth that ties every single one of them together. It was never really about the houses. Every one of these towns lost the engine, the thing that gave people a reason to be there in the first place. The base closed, the mill shut down, the river rose, the cotton economy died. And once that engine was gone, no price tag on earth could bring the buyers back. Because a house was never just walls and a roof. A house is a bet on a town's future. And in these 10 places, buyers looked hard at that future, did the honest math, and quietly walked away. But I don't want to leave you on a hopeless note, because decline is not always destiny. Remember Blytheville? Its steel industry is fighting for a real comeback right now. The rise of remote work could rewrite the rules for river towns that were written off decades ago. As one economist put it, the challenge isn't stopping the decline, it's managing negative growth in a positive way. Some of these towns will crack that code. Some sadly won't. Here's the one lesson to carry with you. Never buy the house. Buy the town's future. Look at the jobs. Watch the schools. Count the empty homes. Check which direction the people are flowing. A cheap price means nothing if the reason to stay has already left. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever lived near a town like this? Watched a place slowly fade? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this opened your eyes, smash that like button and subscribe, because next I'm covering the towns that actually reversed their decline. You won't want to miss how they did it.